Hi folks, I just published an update to the MSIdentityTools module that lets you export all the apps and the permissions you granted to them in your tenant. Now this is the output it generates. It's an Excel file which will show you things like the permissions by users. We also do like a privilege rating of whether it's a high, medium, low privileges. There's also a summary view that says, okay, these are the high risk permissions that have been granted to applications. And if you delegated permissions to users, those are shown here as well. And then there's this overall summary right at the beginning that has all of the information. So let's say you want to see all of the app permissions you granted in your tenant. You'll be able to see that by just filtering this out. Or let's say, for example, you want to see all of the directory.read-write permissions that you've granted. You'll be able to see which apps and which users you consented to. All right, so let's see how you can export this for your tenant. So let's get started by installing the MSIdentityTools module. And once that's done, we also need another module for the Excel export. So that's called Import Excel. And make sure if you already have the module installed for MSIdentityTools, just update to the latest version. Next, we are ready to do the export. First, we need to connect to Microsoft Graph. Now you need the application.read.all permission, right? So you connect to your tenant. And now we can start the export. So let's say export MSID consent grant report. Now we need to call out that we want the Excel report, and we just need to provide a path. So let me call it appconsent.xlsx. Now, depending on the size of your tenant, this can take a while to run because it has to go through all of the service principals in the tenant and then make multiple calls to get the delegate permissions and the application permissions for each of them. So let's wait till all of that finishes and the output is generated. Perfect. Now the output is generated. You should see an app consent XLX file. And with that, we can use this Excel file to review all the permissions that have been granted to users. We can see a pivot table of all of the different permissions. You can apply various filtering here to view and drill down into this information. There's also the chart view of those permissions by resource, permissions by users. I only have a few users with delegate permissions in my tenant. You can see by rating as well, where they fall, whether it's high, medium, low, or unranked. And you also get the summary view of the ones that are specifically flagged as high. And now this high, medium, low, that's being generated based on a CSV file that we have, and you can provide your own rating for these permissions. So if you head over to ak.ms/msid, you should see where this report is. If you go to the assets folder, there is a CSV file. Now, each time you run, a latest version of the CSV is downloaded. But if you want to customize what you rank as high, medium, low, and so on, you can customize this file. And in the PowerShell command, you can say which permission table you want to use. So you can supply your own CSV to generate the custom report. Right? So that's an option as well. Now, one of the neat things I wanted to call out here is when you see the permissions, you can see there's the name listed against each person as well. Now, when you grant delegate permissions, you may or may not be aware that you can consent to just an individual person. So, for example, if you go into Graph Explorer, you might see a prompt to consent, and you might say just consent only to one user. Let me show you, right? So if I go to Graph Explorer and if I go into modify permissions, let's say I want to consent to this. Now, when you click on consent, you'll see this option to either consent on behalf of your organization, which means for all users in the organization, or if you turn this off, then you're, as the admin, you're only granting permission just to your account. Now, how do you know who has been granted permissions, especially with the global admins? You can't really see that from here. Say I've opened one of the apps, which is PNP Management Shell. You can see there's no admin consent, which means I didn't tick that box when you granted the permission. If you tick the box here, it would be granted for everyone, and you would see it listed as granted for all of the users. But if it's user consent, if you click through to these permissions, you can actually see it says granted to just one user, right? So you can see that it's been granted to one user, but you can't really see who that user is. And this report will make it really easy to find out who are the individual users that you've granted permissions to, and you can manage the risk and review it that way. Cool. I hope you found this useful. Please subscribe for more videos like this. Until next time, cheers.